So Leela has decided to join me right at the very beginning of the video, because as I was doing my little test video to make sure I had sound on and everything, they came running, but Esri left and now she's back. Which means there's going to be a bit of a fight for attention on top of me, which means I now have to say off, 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 off. Good dogs, off. I don't know if they're listening to me or not. Anyway, so last week, when I did my top 10 focal flowers, I changed how I did it. Rather than using my top 10 for myself, I chose to use the top 10 that would allow me to carry my flower sales, whether they be pots of bulbs or bouquets or whatever, from the beginning of the season through to the end of the season as seamlessly as possible. And that was a bit of a revelation for me, and I don't know why I never did it that way before, because clearly it makes more business sense to do it that way. And my tiny urban flower farm roadside flower wagon sales are done business in mind, because you do need to have profit over and above your expenditures, your overhead, and your labor. Otherwise, what's the point? It shouldn't cost you anything, and there should be leftover for emergencies, let's say, or just to then reapply the leftover profit into less functional things for the business and just more things that you yourself prefer, or put it in the bank, however you want to do it. Anyway, we're going to apply the same thing for the filler flowers this year, and what I'm going to do is, again, start with the filler flowers that allow me to create sales at the flower wagon from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Now, I can't actually use filler flowers at the beginning of the season because I sell hyacinths, daffodils, and tulips in 1 gallon pots. They don't require filler flowers. They're just 3 bulbs in a pot blooming. But then we get into Mother's Day. And for Mother's Day, I have bouquets. Barely. And this is where the huge revelation for me came into play. Because in order to have bouquets, there are only 2 filler flowers that I have available to use. One that has always made my filler flower list, and one that has never made my filler flower list. In fact, it's so not made my list because I just consider it just something that pops up and is so common. Because when I grew up in Vancouver, we had alleys in the back of our houses everywhere, and the alleys were always full of this flower. So to me, it's just kind of, I've always considered it a discard flower. But I use it in my bouquets for Mother's Day, and I need it in my bouquets for Mother's Day because I only have 3 flowers to use in those bouquets. I have the focal and 2 fillers, and I'll put up the picture of the bouquet, and if you look here, you can see there's only 3 flowers in here. Now, clearly it's not the focal flower, which is the rhododendron. So then I have 2 filler flowers. And can you guess which one it is? I'll just pause for a sec and not tell you which one it is that got added in this year. Well, I'm not going to pause. I'm just going to talk. Put it in the comments section before I start talking to see if you're right about which is the one that's new for this year for my filler flowers. And if you've been following my channel, you'll know what it is. Because the reality is the yellow flower is my kale flowers. And they always make my filler flower list because I use them all the time. I love using them. And the kale flowers, I love using them because they're so prolific. And they've bolted at this time of year. Mother's Day was May 10th for 2025. And I can use them for several months because they bloom for a long time before they start blooming. And my kale has, for whatever reason, perennialized. So I know I have a prolificity of those flowers every year for several months. So they've always made my top 10 filler flowers. However, the blue flower, the bluebell, has never made my top 10 filler flower list. And I'm realizing that I can't do my Mother's Day bouquets without it. So why is that not in my top 10 fillers? Mother's Day is a popular bouquet selling season. It is the beginning of my bouquet selling season. And I need those bluebells. So why on earth would it never have made my top 10 filler flower lists below. I know why. Because there was another one that I used, and I'll let you know what that one is at the end of this video. And to me, it was a shocker that I had to take it off the list. And you'll see what that shocker flower is that I took off my list, because I didn't want to take it off. But the other ones were, again, more important to me to get the flowers continued on through the season. And yeah, so for the first time ever, because I'm changing how I'm looking at my top 10 fillers, looking at it far more like a business, which I should have always done. I mean, I've been a small business owner since I was in my mid-20s. And I've always looked at product profitability versus something that will, there are things that will draw you in, which are not necessarily the most profitable. Then there are things that are the most profitable. And then there are things that you like, and just because you like them doesn't mean that they should be part of the business, because that's just something that you can buy for yourself. It's not something that you should be selling. You should be selling to what your customers want. And I've always known that. So why I didn't apply that to my top 10 list before, I don't know. But anyway, here's just another bouquet that shows the rhododendrons in it. And in this particular bouquet, it also shows the kale flowers, but by this point, the bluebells are finished. The thing about the bluebells is that they actually, their season doesn't last much past the Mother's Day. So then I don't actually really have them available to use in bouquets until other filler flowers come in. But the kale flowers are still very predominant. So as you can see in this bouquet here, I've got the rhododendrons. I actually have a Mount Everest allium coming out the top. I don't put it in my top 10 filler flowers, the Mount Everest alliums, because I just don't have enough of them. I've only got less than 10. And but what you can see is again, the kale flowers, how important they are to this bouquet. So this is why kale flowers have always made my top 10. They were just so important to all my spring bouquets. So we've talked about the first two filler flowers. So what's the third one? Well, the third one really shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who's following this channel, and that is the anemones. And the anemones that I grow are the anemone caramel white, the anemone marron bordeaux, the anemone Dussion sulfide, and the anemone caramel pastel. And in this picture, that's actually two caramel pastels that I've snipped together so that you can show two different colors in that caramel pastel range. One that's reds and pinks with the white, and one that's more like blues and purples with the white. Now, of these four, I love three of them, and I dislike the Dussion sulfide. I really don't like it. However, a lot of my customers do like it. There are lots of people who are really into strong pinks. The fact that I am not, no surprise. Do you see any around me? Again, shouldn't matter. This is a business decision, and it is a popular color with people who buy at my flower wagon. Therefore, my preferences don't always take center stage for what I'm buying, growing, and selling. Now, I use them in bouquets as fillers, as you can see in this picture. I'm almost towards the end of the rhododendrons, probably am at the end. This bouquet was taken on June 8th. I am definitely at the end of the rhododendrons. And I've got it paired with Globemaster and Mount Everest alliums, and you can see that the white caramel anemones become important, because the Globemaster allium, which is the big purple one, it's such a solid mass of color, and the green leaves with it, that if you took away those caramel white anemones, the bouquet would read very one-dimensional. It's just this really solid mass. There's no movement, there's no airiness, there's no real lightness to the bouquet. It just feels like a massive shadow. But you throw in those caramel white anemones into the mix, and now you've got this play of light to dark. And the anemones are less rigid. They're much more fluid in their look, because the stems aren't all straight. So all of a sudden, the bouquet has a lot more depth to it. And that's why the anemones are really, really important in my bouquets, because they are now adding quite a bit of depth. There's some ranunculus in this bouquet, closer down to around the bottom, because they're probably the first ones, so short-stemmed. They don't have that same play of airiness that the anemones do, and I think that play of airiness is far more important. There is actually a pink peony at the back of this bouquet, which with this pale gray backdrop in the photograph, you can barely see. But if you look between the two anemones, you can just see that sort of pink mass of the peony. But again, the caramel white anemones, they will play off of any color, whether it's a pale pink, a purple, or a green. And because they're just one layer of petals that aren't all flat, they sort of move around a bit. And because the stems are crooked, there's just so much more fluidity to the bouquet. And if I had to choose between anemones and ranunculus, I would choose anemones. I find in a bouquet they add so much more. I also sell the anemones in pop cans. So here's a pop can that has 3 caramel white anemones. I sell the pop cans for $4 each, or 3 for $10. The anemones that are too short stemmed to go into bouquets go into the pop cans. So it's not like I'm sacrificing bouquet flowers for the pop cans. I'm simply using the ones that have stems that are too short for the pop cans. I mean, you know what the size of a pop can is, and if you look at this picture, it's basically 2 of the anemones are just double height of a pop can, and one's just a little bit taller. And they have been cut down. When I harvested them, they were cut at the soil surface. So short stems come in very handy for the pop cans. Here's a pop can that has the anemone disulfide scions in them. And I will say that the pop cans with those bright fuchsia pink ones in them sell really well along with the caramel white ones. And their stem lengths are generally not long enough for my bouquets, so they mostly get used in the pop cans, but sometimes they get used in the bouquets. Here's a picture of the 2 of them together so you can see the difference in height in their stem lengths. And here's a picture of the caramel white in a vase. Now, I was asked recently how much I sell my vases for, and it's very dependent on what the vase is, how many flowers are in it, etc. This particular vase with these number of caramel white anemones in them, I sold for $20. Here's another vase that has, I believe, 4 of the, what are they called? Anemone Marron Bordeaux, which is the deep purple ones, as well as a couple of the caramel whites. It also has a stem of Astilbe leaves in there for greenery. And I sold this for $15 because the vase really wasn't worth much. So the value of the whole thing was just based on the few flowers that I had in there. And it was a really short vase. I don't think it was much taller than a pop can. So those are pretty short-stemmed anemones that are in there as well. So that makes a difference too. Like how tall is the vase? How tall are the anemones? If they're really short anemones that could never get used for a vase, I'm basically selling them in pop cans, 3 for $4. So in here I've got like about 6, 7 anemones, 8 anemones. So that's less than, and I sell 3 pop cans for $10. So that's basically $10 worth of flowers in this because there's a branch of Astilbe leaves in there, which means I gave $5 for the vase, and the vase I probably picked up for $1. So then we move on to my next filler flower, and this is one that I find really interesting that a lot of people drop it, but you know, different climates mean different things. So what grows easily in my climate, which is a temperate rainforest, we get in the spring especially, we get a lot of rain. Just for a little bit of an example of what that is, our annual rainfall is over 7 feet, which is 2 feet more than Vancouver, BC gets. And everybody knows Vancouver as a rainy climate, and yet annually we get 2 feet more of rain than Vancouver does. We are extremely wet. And that might be why some flowers do better for me than for other people. Clearly, I mean, I'm not in a hot, dry climate. I'm in a temperate rainforest. That said, in the summer we are very hot and dry. We don't get much rain anymore in July and August. We used to. Not in August, but we used to get some rain in July. We used to get a lot of rain in June. This past year we didn't get, I don't think, any rain in June, so things are changing. But anyway, back to the Bachelor buttons. I grow pretty much only the black button Bachelor buttons for the last couple of years. That's all I've grown. There's been a few blue ones that have popped up, but those were just seeds that were misplaced into that seed packet, and they bloomed blue, so I used them. Now, my Bachelor buttons never grow taller than 3 feet. I'm going to say it's because of how wet we are. Our nitrogen content in our soil is probably a little less than others because it gets washed out. And I also don't fertilize my flowers. I direct compost over the course of the year, and that each area only gets 1 direct composting. So I would say I'm not over fertilizing. Some people would say I'm under fertilizing. But the thing with fertilizing your flowers is that the more fertilizer you give them, the more nitrogen you give them, and the faster and taller they grow, the thinner the cell structure on the stems, etc. is, and the more prone they are to disease. So I also don't get much, if any, disease or bug pressure. And I've only recently realized this through just whatever readings that I do, that if you want to reduce, if you are in an area with a lot of bug pressure, it might be best to give less fertilizer so the stems on your plants, flowers in this case, become thicker and more adverse to the bugs. So that might be one reason I have virtually no bug pressure. But the other thing is because I don't fertilize it with nitrogen, is that they don't grow these big, tall, lanky stems that everybody gets. No, see, last week I had a hair on my face, and now this week I got a hair from my face. That's crazy. Might be a dog hair. Anyway, so because they only grow 3 feet tall, and because the cell structure of their stems is thicker, amongst other things that I do, they don't need to be staked. So they're not flimsy and wonky and all this stuff. So I find it really, really easy to harvest. I don't find it difficult to cut my Bachelor button stems at all, which is a long way of saying this is why black button Bachelor buttons, well, or any Bachelor buttons, I like using as fillers, but other people might not. One of the other things I do with them to give them stronger stems is I hand water, and I will aim the hose of water at it in the bed that they're in. I'll go around the whole bed aiming at it, so it's getting pushed first this way, then this way, then this way, then this way. And by doing that, that in itself creates a healthier stem. So here is a bouquet that shows you how I like to use black button Bachelor buttons. I don't use many of them in a bouquet. I will simply use them often just for height and for airiness. And that's why I just have stuck to the one color, because that height and airiness, and then that dark color, because it's off by itself, that little dark head of the Bachelor button is much more dramatic than a paler color would be. So this is why I like the black button Bachelor buttons. Now here it's paired with the Globemaster Allium, a Mount Everest Allium, a herbaceous peony, which is the pale pink one, and an Ito peony, which is the more what color would you call it? I would call it almost more of a cranberry color. Here is a bouquet that I've used it in, where it is paired with a more garden aesthetic bouquet, and I've put in a few more of them. And the reason for that is because this bouquet has naturally kind of separated in the center, and I wanted to have more of the black buttons in there so that that separation has a black button Bachelor button in each one, but then you can see there's one sort of off by itself, and that's sort of into that negative space void that's created by those two little separations, which are created by the snapdragons in this bouquet. I also have sunflowers, pink and white Astilbe fronds in there, and the tall green stems of foliage is my Snowberry branches, which I love to use. And this bouquet was taken on June 24th. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing and giving me a like. I'd really, really appreciate it. So let's get on with the next filler flower that I use, and that is Astilbe. So I grow 3 different types of Astilbe. I grow the bridal veil, which is the white one, a pink one, and a red one, and I don't know what they are. I've had them for years and years. I've carted them from property to property because I've loved Astilbe even before I was a cut flower grower. And my 2 favorites are the white and the pink, but I also grow the red because they don't grow, they don't bloom at the same time. So the pink blooms before the red, and as the pink is finishing, the red comes on. Now I've completely forgotten whether the white, well, you can see, no, completely forgotten. Clearly it's first in line, because it was after the red. In this picture here, you can see that the white bridal veil is fully frothed out, and it's got the pink behind it. So clearly it's the white, it goes white, pink, red, not pink, red, white. Otherwise, the pink wouldn't be blooming in the background of this picture. So here is a bouquet where I've got the bridal veil Astilbe in it, and you can see that lightness and sparkle that it adds to a bouquet. Again, it's a very garden aesthetic bouquet. It's got, this is one that has the blue Bachelor's button in it that I did not plant, but just popped up in amongst the black button ones. It's got the snowberry branches, it's got snapdragons, it's got a little bit of feverfew down around the bottom. I do not consider feverfew a cut flower that I grow. It is an absolute weed on my property. If I let it grow everywhere it popped up, I would have nothing but fields of feverfew. I've got borage growing in here. I love borage in bouquets. That's that little blue flower that sort of tips down. The biggest problem with borage and why it doesn't make my filler flowers is because it doesn't like being in the heat of my flower wagon. So I can only use it on days that are cooler, rainy, cloudy, never when the sun is out, because it just doesn't like being in the heat of my flower wagon, because my flower wagon gets sun most of the day. So it does get hot in there. So I have to plan what I use based on the temperatures that get within the flower wagon. It's not a controlled environment whatsoever. So in this next bouquet, I featured the bridal veil Astilbe in the last bouquet. In this bouquet, I'm going to feature the pink Astilbe. It's got bridal veil in it too, but in this one, it is the pink Astilbe that is much more important in its pink frothiness than the white frothiness. And that is because it plays off so nicely with those snapdragons and is such a nice contrast to the sunflowers that are in the bouquet. The white Astilbe is in this bouquet because I probably only had the 2 pink fronds and I wanted to put 3 Astilbes in there, so the third one happened to be bridal veil. I like having the 2 and the 1, but realistically, it is the pink in this bouquet that really stands out. And in this next bouquet, it's got the red Astilbe in it. It's a much harsher color. This bouquet was taken on July 11th. It's a much harsher color, and it comes on after the pink and the white, or the white and the pink, and is just as useful as them. So I do need to use it, even though it's the one that I like the least, but it is an important part of my bouquets at this time of year. And here, just paired with some poppy pods, some a hydrangea, a mophead hydrangea in the center, sunflowers. I've got some of my snowdrift double-headed Shasta daisies, which I love. Snapdragons, and there's even a drumstick allium just off to that side of the bouquet. Now the interesting thing here is that you can see that the drumstick alliums are, at least in my garden, the same size as my poppy pods. It's because I grow really big poppy pods, but my drumstick alliums might grow slightly on the smaller side. So they're much similar in size, and this is one reason why I don't think I would ever do drumstick alliums, a number of them, because the poppy pods are so much easier to grow. They just pop up everywhere on their own, and so take far less of my time to worry about than the drumstick alliums, which take no time either. They're a perennial, but there are areas then that I can no longer direct compost in, whereas wherever the poppies are growing, I can. That said, I sell all of my poppy pods now to a buyer. So does that mean I should grow drumstick alliums? Or should I just save some of the pods for myself? Or should I use neither? So there's interesting ways of looking at your filler flowers. Why should you grow them? Should you grow them? And if you do grow them, why are you growing them? Are they really important to your bouquets? Are they not important to your bouquets? Is there something else that's easier to use that would be better to grow, and so forth and so on? So the other thing about Astilbe, so we've done the 3 colors, but there's actually a 4th version of Astilbe that has become, as of 2025, very important to me. And that is because prior to that, any Astilbe fronds that had started to lose their color, I would cut them and dry them where I could retain as much of their color as possible and have them as a dried flower. But I don't really do dried flowers anymore. And in 2024, I had sort of cut some of them because I thought, well, I can still use some of them in my fall bouquets. But I got kind of lazy and I only cut about half of each one of the colors, not the white ones because they look terrible cut as a dried flower with their white in them. They look more like white and brown and they don't look good at all. But the pink ones and the red ones retain enough of the pink and the red in them to make them useful for bouquets. But I only harvested half of each and I left the rest on the plant because I just never got around to it, didn't have the time. Doesn't matter, I left half of them on the plant. Well, fall rolls around and I didn't really feel like adding the dried Astilbes. We're talking 2 years ago now. I didn't really feel like adding the dried Astilbes to my bouquets for whatever reason. I can't remember why because it was a while ago. But I saw now the brown Astilbe fronds in the garden, and I went and I'm looking at them, and they're really pliable, and they look like fresh cut stuff because they're not dry. They have the full texture and visceralness of a fresh cut flower or leaf or whatever. And I thought, I'll use these because I didn't really want to use the dried ones. I think I know why. It was our shop was really going quite a bit, and I had left the door open to my seed room, which is where I was drying the dried Astilbe, and the dust from the shop, because it was being used quite a bit, I had a lot of shop dust on the dried fronds, and they didn't look fresh. They looked, not great, and I didn't want to clean them up. So I used the freshly cut dried ones on the plant and loved using them. So for 2025 last year, I didn't dry any Astilbe. I just left them all on the plants, the ones that weren't used, and come fall, I cut them and used them in the bouquets, as you can see in this bouquet. And it looks fresh. It feels fresh. It adds a fall autumnal color to the bouquet while still being fresh. You look at that bouquet, you don't know that that is pink Astilbe from the spring or the summer, or a red one from the summer. You see it as a brown frond, fresh frond, that has been introduced to the bouquet. And it added so much, and I just love using the browned Astilbe fronds in the fall of my bouquets, and I used them a lot. In this particular bouquet, it was taken on October 7th, and I've got it paired again with snowberry branches, but in this case you can see there's some little snowberries starting to appear on the branches. I've got my double-click cosmos, which don't look very double-click. They look very one-layered in here. That's the snow puff and the rose bonbon. No, that's cranberry. There is a rose bonbon in the back. I've got a couple of Spartacus dinner plate dahlias, and you can also see that while I use sunflowers for a focal flower through most of the season from June through till when they finish, and they finish approximately the middle of October, but they're a lot smaller at that time because of the lack of the daylight has shrunk and the temperatures have gotten colder, and the sunflowers, even though they're at the exact same spacing, are not really a focal flower anymore. They're more of a filler flower. But I'm growing them for a focal flower for earlier in the year, but that doesn't mean I can't use them as a filler flower in October. And as I said, this picture was taken on October 7th. So then the next filler flower that is super, super important to me and super, super easy to grow is completely, well, not completely effortless, because I do have to cut it back in the fall or winter, which is the time of year where you're not doing much of anything else anyway, is my purple marjoram. Purple marjoram is completely effortless because it's a plant that increases its diameter, which is why in the fall I have to cut it back. I have to like pull up the outsides of it if I want to keep the patch the size it is and get rid of the root section and let it die, because if I just simply put it anywhere else, it will just root itself in and grow. It will root wherever if you drop one little stem of purple marjoram on the ground, it will root and grow. So it's kind of like the feverfew. It just loves the environment that it's in, and so it will do well no matter what. So it is pretty much effortless through the growing season. And again, in the off season, I can just go in there and trim back on the root area where I don't want it to grow with a shovel, digging it out, and then just put it aside to completely die off before it ends up going into my direct composting matter. So it does have to be almost quarantined until it's completely died before it can then go back and replenish the soil with whatever it has in it as a brown matter versus green matter. I love using it in bouquets. I mean, if you look at this bouquet, it's got an evergreen gladiola popping up the top. It's got a gold light sunflower, a labyrinth dinner plate dahlia. You can see a white sunflower at the back. The dark green laurel leaves around the bottom. And then spiking up, creating that airiness, is the purple marjoram. But it's not just creating airiness. The texture of it is so much different than a lot of the other flowers that I grow. It's such tiny little flower heads in amongst that little mass of purple dome that it has a, how would you describe that texture? It's almost like a carpet, the type of texture it has. Like you kind of just want to rub it. It just feels like it would be so nice and soft. Whereas you wouldn't want to rub the evergreen gladiola or the sunflowers or the labyrinth. But you do really kind of want to touch the purple marjoram. So it has that visceral texture to it that I just think is so fun. So it adds that little bit of purple. It adds the texture. It adds that height and airiness to the bouquet. I mean, take that out of there and the bouquet, again, would be quite a bit more of a solid mass. So purple marjoram to me, and I don't remember when it starts blooming up. It blooms, this bouquet was taken on August 5th. So it's blooming for most of August. I can't remember if it blooms into September or if it's blooming in July too, but it does bloom for most of August. Now, I decided to go and pause the video and go and get another bouquet because I didn't have one up here to explain this. But I do also use the purple marjoram lower down in the bouquet, as you can see in this bouquet. And now I've got the spike of espresso glad in there, and I've got a AC Ben dinner plate dahlia as well as a Papageno dinner plate dahlia and a white night sunflower. And I have a bunch of purple marjoram in there. But it's not spiking up high, it's lower. It's still higher, but it's lower. And it still creates that visceral texture to the bouquet and the slight purple color, but it's not creating that spikiness. So you don't have to use it as a spike, which is why I had paused the video, gone and got another picture to put up here to show you that you don't need to use it as a spike. You can use a few more stems of it as a more en masse grouping, just to add the texture. So that's what I did in this bouquet. So that's for the purple marjoram. We are now going to talk about my cosmos. There are 3 cosmos that I love, and they're all double click, and that's the cranberry, the snow puff, and the rose bonbon. And I love all 3 of those popping up in a bouquet. I grew 4 this past year. I also grew the bicolor violet. Now, my bicolor violets were pretty short-stemmed, like very short-stemmed. I couldn't even use them in bouquets. I don't know why that is, because the other 3 were perfectly long stem. So this is now a query for you. Have you grown the bicolor violet, and is it shorter stemmed than the other 3? And they're all double clicks. And I started them all at the same time, and I planted them all at the same time, and they more or less all started blooming at the same time, but my bicolor violet never grew, I don't think it ever even hit 10 inches, which is very, very strange. I don't understand that. So it had absolutely no other difference than the other 3, except that it was, if they grew in a row of 3, it was the one that actually would have received more sun. So yeah, have any of you grown it, and have you found that it is a shorter stemmed than the other ones? Now I will say again, because of the way I don't fertilize, my cosmos don't grow overly tall. They grow about the same thing. They don't grow ever any more than 3 feet, probably less than. I also plant them so that they're blooming later in the season. So they're not getting out into, I don't know when I plant them out in the garden. I start them in seeds. Oh, I know when they go out in the garden, whenever my alliums are finished, because they go in the space of where my Globe Master alliums are growing. And as soon as their leaves have died back, then I cut them all back and I plant my cosmos, whenever that is. So that would be somewhere towards the end of June or the beginning of July, depending on the year. So they're not getting planted out into the garden until summer. So they're not getting any springtime in the garden. They're sitting in their pots until waiting for the Globemaster alliums to die back. But they're all doing that. So they're all receiving the exact same growing conditions, and yet the bicolor violets are so much shorter. Now here's a bouquet that I took on for September 15th. So they're blooming for me in September, and I've got all three of the double click cosmos in there, and I grow the double clicks because they have longer vase life, because they have more petals. If a petal falls off, it's got so many other petals you don't even really notice it. But I actually find they have pretty good vase life, and it's probably because I grow them for later in the season. I mean, in September, they're not going through as much of a heat time period for their blooming time, so they probably just have a slightly longer blooming schedule simply because I'm not harvesting them in the heat of the summer. That said, all three are in this bouquet. You've got the rose bonbon poking up the top on that side. You've got the cranberry poking up on the top on that side. You've got some of the snow puff ones in the center. And the snow puff ones at this time of year just look so great with my snowberries, because at this time of year I'm getting snowberries on my snowberry branches, and I'm using them in the bouquets of snowberries for an additional texture and color, because white is a color within a bouquet. I have a red lemon bicolor pro-cut sunflower in here. I have a Yarra Falls dinner plate dahlia, which is the one on this side, and I know it's Yarra Falls because it's got the white tips on the petals, of which you can just see one. I have an AC Ben in the center, and laurel leaves around the edge of the bouquet. Now, on my last video, someone left a comment that they don't grow white flowers. Not my last video, pardon me, on the 2026 Color of the Year video. But she left the comment on it after my last video went out, so I'm getting a bit confused. She said she doesn't grow white flowers because they get brown tips on them always. I don't have that experience. My snowberries, clearly they're going to go, they're brown at this time of year, which is January, because they've been sitting in intense rain for the last 3 months. So they look brown and ugly and sad, but I'm not harvesting the berries in January. I'm harvesting them in September and October. And they are not brown, and they only get brown and mushy from the rain. The snow puff cosmos, they never get brown. I mean, when I do vase tests on them, they will lose all their petals without ever showing any sign of brown on them. Same as, what else do I grow that's a white flower? Let me think. Do I grow any other white flowers? I don't grow very many. Oh yeah, right. The caramel white anemones, which is one of my favorite. It doesn't get any, it'll lose its petals and still be perfectly white. So that does not happen to me. Anybody want to leave any comments in the section down below if they know why I would not get brown on my white sunflowers never get brown either. Why mine don't get brown tips on them versus other people's do? Is it climate? Is it the hotter, drier climates that create the brown tips? I don't know. I've shown the snowberries in a couple of bouquets that I've shown already, and it is one of my filler flowers. It's a berry, it's not a flower. I don't care. I use it as though it was a flower because the snowberries are absolutely gorgeous. And when the weather is right, the branches are so loaded with the berries, they just look so good in a bouquet. I mean, they are stunning in a bouquet. If you look at this bouquet, I've got a Kenora Macub B dinner plate dahlia, which is that super, super dark red one that's in there. It's actually just a little bit darker than the Spartacus dahlias, which on camera always look more red, but the Kenora Mac B always looks more black. So that's just the way the light reflects off of them, and it's because the Kenora Mac B, well, the Kenora Mac B has much smaller petals on it. You would think that would reflect more light, but it doesn't. The Spartacus one does. There's also an AC Loomis dinner plate dahlia in here, which is the more crimson color one. I can tell it's AC Loomis because I can see there's frosting on that dahlia, white frosting. I've got several yellow sunflowers, whether they're gold, light, or orange, I don't know. I've got my Rose Bonbon double click Cosmo, which again is not looking very double click. I will say that a lot of my Cosmos this year for 2025 did not come out as a double click, but I had accidentally put them through quite a bit of stress in the spring. because I had stupidly started the seeds earlier, thinking I would get earlier flowers, forgetting I have to wait till the alliums are finished before I plant them out. So they ended up sitting in pots for far too long before they got planted out. And that little bit of extra stress that they had from being root bound in their pots for, I think, a couple of extra weeks is why I think that a lot of them weren't actually fuller headed in their petals. So interesting. But they still performed well for vase life. And again, I think it's because time of year. I mean, again, this bouquet was taken on September 26th. But as you see, I've got the snowberries poking out the top, and those little balls of white berries, they just look so beautiful in the bouquet. And everybody will know what they are because the snowberries grow in my front garden right near the road. And they are shoots that have come underneath the fence from the neighbors, and she's got a whole huge section of snowberries growing there. So they can see the snowberries growing on the bush and then see it in the bouquet. So yeah, really love snowberries in my bouquets. I actually let the roots come underneath the fence and grow once I realized how much I loved them in bouquets. Prior years, especially before I was doing cut flowers, they were an annoyance because I was constantly having to pull them up and get rid of them. Now I welcome them to grow under the fence. And probably in the late winter, I will dig up some sections with roots and get them going in pots and see if I can grow them in pots just to increase the stock of the snowberries that I have on my own property. Because where they're growing right now, they just have a very, very small area. So the other filler flower that I grew for 2025 that has to make my top 10, that comes online later than all that, is my mini pumpkins. I love them in bouquets. Specifically, what I grew this year was the Baby Boo white mini pumpkin. I didn't have any Jack Be Little, which is the orange mini pumpkin this year. I had the previous year. And I wasn't sure I was going to like the white mini pumpkins in bouquets just because of their color, because it's such a large mass of white. But check out this bouquet here. I mean, I did a lot of bouquets from about the middle of October to the end of October. I had a mini pumpkin, Baby Boo mini pumpkin in every single bouquet that I did. And look how it looks popping out in amongst those dinner plate dahlias and the sunflowers with the with the autumnal Astilbe fronds coming out the top, the snowberries. And have I got anything else in this bouquet? I should have some cosmos. I think I can see a cosmo. It's sort of tucked around the back. But I really, really enjoy how the mini pumpkins looked in the bouquets. For 2026, I am going to grow the Baby Boo as well as the Jack Be Little. I didn't grow the Jack Be Little for this past year. I think I didn't have any seeds of it and I had forgotten to buy them, so I just grew the Baby Boo because I had those seeds. And now, for the 10th top filler flower of what I grow, it's Dahlias. Now, Dahlias make my top 10 focal flowers, but that's the dinner plates. I use the dinner plates as a focal flower, absolutely. The ball dahlias and the decorative dahlias, because they are a lot smaller than a dinner plate dahlia and are blooming at the same time, and my dahlias bloom from, I think the first bouquet I did with a dahlia in it was July 10th, something like that. And then they bloom past when I stopped doing the flower wagon. I still had dahlias blooming right up until I finally decided to start digging up my tubers, which was, I believe, the third week in November. I stopped the flower wagon, not because I didn't have the flowers, but because it was so miserable, our weather, in the mornings, that I just told myself, get through to the end of October and then shut it down, because it was windy, cold, and intense rains. I can handle 2 out of those 3, but I don't like all 3. I can handle windy and cold. I can handle windy and rain. I can handle, well, any combination of that. But when it's windy, rainy, and cold, that's just ugly to be out there. So, especially on your hands, because, you know, everything's wet because it's raining. So you've got soaking wet hands, and then you're having to cut flowers. And, didn't enjoy it, so I just said, get through to the end of October, and then we're closing down the flower wagon, which is what I did. Now, I grow quite a few, well, quite a few is relative speaking. I grow a number of ball dahlias and decorative dahlias, and I grow them specifically for a variety of color or variety of texture. In this picture of 9, I don't have the names up, but I know what they are. The top, on your side it'll be this side. The top one on this side is, when I look at it on the computer, it's on that side, is Wizard of Oz. That's one of my favorite. That's a ball dahlia. Beside it is a water lily dahlia called Keith H, which I love using. Beside that is, oh, I have forgotten the name of that one because I don't grow it anymore. What is the name of that one? I didn't look at this picture when I sourced it out to make sure that everything on here was ones that I grow. And I grow 2 of them on here I don't grow anymore. That's like a purple ball. Marble ball, that's what it's called. And I didn't grow it anymore because I got very little marbling on my marble ball dahlias. So I stopped growing it because I didn't want just a solid purple ball dahlia of that color. I had other things that I could use for that. Below that is Petra's Wedding, which is a white one. Another one I get 0 browning on. In the middle of this grouping is slightly blown out Sylvia, which I have stopped growing because I don't like the color, and 2, for whatever reason, my stems on my Sylvias were always a little on the thin side. It was very prolific, but it was a color that I actually really disliked using. So it would bloom prolifically and look good in the flower beds, and yet if I looked at any of my bouquets, it basically never got used. Next to that is a Sweet Fabian, which is one that I dropped for this year. And the reason I dropped it is because I didn't want another pink. It's not that I didn't like it. I loved Sweet Fabian, but I have such minimal space to grow in that there was colors that I felt were gapping. So I didn't need another pink. I wanted a color that there was a gap in. So I replaced it with one that I thought maybe could perform better. And this year I replaced it with what, which was Jowie Frambeau, which was supposed to be more, it's still a pink, but more of a strawberry pink. I may have gotten a mislabeled tuber because it didn't look anything like Jowie Frambeau, so I still have no idea if I like that one or not. But the replacement didn't do its job because it wasn't what it was supposed to be. Below that, I have Arabian Nights, which is a decorative dahlia in a deep dark red. Love it. Beside that is Cornell Bronze. Absolutely love Cornell Bronze. And beside that, which is a ball dahlia, and beside that is a decorative dahlia called Blutiful, which I also really, really love. Now I use my ball and decorative dahlias also in pop cans, as you can see in this picture here. I've got 2 Cornell Bronze, 2 Bolt, which is the yellow one, and 2 of the Wizard of Oz, and they sell really well in the pop cans. I also sell them in vase arrangements. You can see in this one I've got a whole, this vase arrangement was done on September 25th, and it's got quite a few of the white Petra's Wedding in there, as well as a couple of the Keith H's. I think, is that a Keith H at the back? I don't know. And I stuck a short little stem of laurel leaves in there. I sold this vase arrangement for $20 because the vase that it's in wasn't really worth much of anything. So most of that money went towards the actual flowers that are in the arrangement and not to that actual vase itself, which only cost me $1. Very, very thin, walled, and just not really all, I mean, it looks great in the photograph, but on its own, it's not that appealing of a vase. So it didn't have much value as far as I was concerned, the vase itself. So those are my top 10 filler flowers for this year based on what 10 filler flowers work best through the course of the season. And I did say that there was one that I, because of that, absolutely had to drop, which shocked me because I never would have dropped it from my top 10 had I simply based it on the 10 filler flowers that I love the most. And that was sweet peas. I can't believe I dropped sweet peas from my filler flowers. They bloom for me for 3 months, June, July, and August. They start blooming almost exactly at the beginning of June every year. I would have preferred that they start blooming in May, but they never do. They get planted out in, I start them in my seed room at the beginning of February, and they're planted out at the end of February. So starting them earlier isn't going to make any difference. They're waiting for the temperature to be right. And then they don't start blooming until the very beginning of June. But they bloom all through the summer and stop blooming when September rolls around, because why? I don't know why they stop blooming for September. They're heavily into September. All of a sudden they're going to seed a lot. So something's triggered them that the season's coming to an end and they need to start reproducing. I love sweet peas. I use them in my pop cans and they sell well in my pop cans. I use them in bouquets, but I only use them in custom bouquets. I don't use them in my roadside flower wagon bouquets, and that's why I had to drop them, because the roadside flower wagon bouquets are more valuable to me than the custom bouquets, just because of volume of sales. And I'm very sad to have taken them off of my top 10 filler list. Now I talked, interestingly enough, as you will have noticed, I use dahlias both as a focal flower with my dinner plates and a filler flower with my decorative and ball dahlias. They have always been my bread and butter dahlias. They are the thing that I started off growing for cut flowers, and that's all I grew as cut flowers. I didn't do bouquets, I just did the cut flowers of the dahlias. They are important to me as a small plant that I sell in the spring. They are important to me from July when they start blooming right through to when the flower wagon ends. They are like my most important flower, whether it's focal or filler. And if you want to know what my top 10 dahlias are, check out this video up here, and I will see you guys all next week. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.